brings with it the proliferation of top 10 lists, as critics and film publications share their picks for the best movies of 2023. As is Eyebrow Cinema tradition, however, we will not be doing that. Do you really need me to tell you that Oppenheimer was pretty good? Probably not. So instead, I'll be counting down the top 10 best movies that I watched for the first time in 2023. Maybe that's a little self-indulgent, but it's also an opportunity to share some great movies that I really loved. So if you're looking for some film recommendations to ring in the new year, look no further. This is the top 10 best movies I watched in 2023. Number 10. Cowboy Bebop, the movie. Are there more complex, more historically significant films I could have placed in the number 10 slot? I suppose so, but sometimes you gotta prioritize fun, and few other films last year gave me as pure a sense of escapism as Cowboy Bebop, the movie. For some context, my partner and I spent the early months of 2023 watching through the original Cowboy Bebop TV series and quickly fell in love with the show's effortlessly cool fusion of noir, westerns, and science fiction. Set in a future where humanity has abandoned Earth and colonized the stars, the series follows the crew of the Bebop as they attempt to scrape out a living bounty hunting across the galaxy. Most episodes tell standalone stories where the crew take on a unique bounty, a simple but highly malleable formula, which allows for episodes ranging from goofy comedic romps to dystopian sci-fi horror, and everything in between. And amidst these episodic adventures, brought to life with jaw-dropping animation and bolstered by a rightfully iconic and eclectic soundtrack, Cowboy Bebop also develops an incredibly rich ensemble of characters, building slowly and then suddenly to a stunning and deeply melancholic finale. I don't watch a lot of anime, but Cowboy Bebop is far and away the best anime series I've ever seen, and as fantastic as the ending may have been, I was not quite ready to let go of these characters. Enter Cowboy Bebop the movie. The story is set just before the series finale, picking up when the main ensemble is at the height of their shared relationship dynamic. The plot does technically offer an escalation worthy of a feature film, what with its terrorist attack involving a bioweapon unleashed on Mars, and new villain Vincent proving one of the most formidable antagonists of the series. At the same time though, the Bebop crew approach the threat with their usual laid-back attitude, and are also rather unambiguously motivated by a stretch of poverty rather than any altruistic notions. The filmmakers have also used the expanded runtime not just for more elaborate plots and set pieces, but also for stretching the seemingly mundane. Some of the film's best moments are when Spike or Ed just walk Mars streets pursuing leads, largely without dialogue. These do technically progress the plot, but the real joy is in leisurely hanging out with these characters and getting familiar with a new setting. This lightness is punctuated by some of the hardest hitting action scenes in all of Bebop. You could definitely accuse the film of just being an extended episode of the series, but frankly, that's all I wanted. I loved this world and the people in it, and was more than happy for one last adventure before saying goodbye. See you, Space Cowboy. You will be missed. Number 9. Wild at Heart. I wasn't totally sure what to make of Wild at Heart when I saw it back in August, but all these months later, I'm still not totally sure what to make of it. On one level, the film is among the nastiest and most mean-spirited David Lynch has ever made. The violence descends into downright ghoulish depths, and the same can be said of Willem Dafoe's Bobby Peru, a villain whose depravity manifests in physical grotesqueness. But on another level, Wild at Heart is deeply romantic. This is a love story after all, and the physical chemistry between Nick Cage and Laura Dern is palpable. That sense of affection goes a long way to create a tenderness that contrasts the ugliness which surrounds Sailor and Lulu. And on yet another level still, Wild at Heart is David Lynch's funniest movie. The sheer absurdity of its mix of rockabilly road movie and Wizard of Oz homage, coupled with the eccentric personalities, had me in stitches. This might have simply been a byproduct of seeing the film in a theater with an audience on exactly the right wavelength, but I could not believe how much I was laughing. I think what really sold the film for me, though, was the repeated use of the song Slaughterhouse by thrash metal band Power Mad. Particularly awesome is a scene where Lulu says she wants to go dancing, and we cut to her and Sailor rocking out in a heavy metal bar. Even with Wild at Heart's more nightmarish elements, this is still a world I want to live in. Number 8. Kiss Me Deadly. Private Eye Mike Hammer has a chance encounter with Christina, a woman in trouble who shortly after is killed by thugs covering up a greater conspiracy. Eager to uncover the truth and avenge Christina, Hammer sets off to investigate her murder and expose the villains behind it. Seems like familiar noir material, but something's off with Kiss Me Deadly. The cold open, which thrusts us into Christina's mad sprint from some unknown threat, and the reverse credits, scored to a car radio and Christina's sobs, prepares us for a disconcerting film. A promise immediately fulfilled in the first instance of violence. We don't see Christina's torture, but the way her dangling legs evoke images of meat on a hook is far more gruesome than any explicit cruelty could ever be. And it would be one thing if it were just the film's villains who were so obscenely cruel, but it's also the hero. Despite a seemingly noble motivation, Mike Hammer is a sadistic bully who gets off on the suffering he inflicts in his violent path towards the truth. He's also barely a detective, unable to solve the mystery with quick-witted insights or intelligence, but bulldozing his way through everyone that stands in front of him. This decline of the noir hero is part of a larger commentary on Cold War paranoia, which begins abstract, but becomes shockingly literal as the plot develops, culminating in one of the greatest endings to any film noir I've ever seen. Number 7. Our Hospitality. One of the best things about silent comedies is how the humor often interweaves with tension. Such is the case with Our Hospitality, a comedy about a family trying to kill Buster Keaton. The film is a comedic send-up of a Hatfield-McCoy-style feud, in this case the Canfields and the McKays. Buster plays the last descendant of the McKay family, who innocently begins romancing Virginia, a Canfield daughter, with neither aware of the other's ancestry. Virginia, in turn, unknowingly brings Buster home to her bloodthirsty father and brothers. The catch is, the Canfield hospitality prevents them from murdering a guest in their home, so the men need to force Buster outside to kill him, while Buster fights to stay inside. This farcical war of wills is the source of a lot of the film's humor, and I especially love Keaton's increasingly desperate stalling to avoid having to go outside. There's also the simple comedy of an unwanted guest lounging in someone else's home, magnified tenfold by the high stakes. The film's climax eventually moves the action outdoors, and at this point starts to resemble a wilderness survival epic in its stunt work and struggles against the elements, while also being very funny. And amidst the laughter and sheer entertainment, the film also offers a pointed critique of the contradiction that is Southern hospitality. An appearance of politeness and adherence to noble traditions, which thinly masks an intense violence. Our Hospitality does not insist on this subtext, but it's thoughtfully implemented, and manifests in several hilarious instances of dark comedy. Number 6. The Dawn Patrol. It's been a good year for me and Howard Hawks. I rewatched a couple of his movies I had previously underrated and liked a lot more a second time around, and I also discovered some lesser-known gems. The least known and brightest of these gems is The Dawn Patrol, Hawks' oldest surviving talkie and a riveting anti-war drama. The film follows a squadron of British fighter pilots during World War I as they cope with loss and a lack of proper support from the chain of command. The first act's primary conflict is between our idealistic protagonist and his seemingly uncaring commanding officer. It's a compelling narrative, which effectively garners sympathy for the hero, but it's also just the film's first layer. As the story unfolds, Hawks reveals the officer to be less a villain than simply a cog in an unfair machine, which sacrifices lives without end and without clear purpose for those on the front lines. Drama is found not merely in the skies, though for the record the aerial battles are astoundingly good, shot and edited for maximum excitement and with brilliant use of then cutting-edge sound technology, but in how the men at all levels of authority do their best to navigate these unjust systems. That fatalistic melancholy is pervasive, even in moments of levity. Hawks is famous for his hangout scenes, and the moments of male bonding here are loaded with weight. The joys and camaraderie in a night of drunken revelry are so much more profound because the men may not have another chance at carefree fun again. To seize happiness in the face of war and to fight desperately to survive in a dogfight both demonstrate the same lust for life. Number 5. Jean Dillman, 23 Quai du Commerce, 1080, Brussels. If you're thinking that I saw Sight and Sound list Jean Dillman the greatest film of all time last December and hastily added it to my watch list so I could stay caught up on the newest shift in the canonization of cinema, well, you'd be half right. I've actually had Jean Dillman on my radar for a very long time, but I was hesitant to go in lightly. More specifically, I was hesitant to watch Jean Dillman at home. A 3-hour and 20-minute movie that actively courts tedium with long scenes depicting the completion of household chores in mundane detail seemed the worst possible film to watch while being bombarded by the distractions of smartphones, email, and my chaos-bringing trio of cats. Thankfully, the Sight and Sound list inspired some programming at my favorite movie theater, which meant I could see Jean Dillman in the best of all contexts. And I'm so glad I did, because I loved this film in a way I'm not sure I would have if watched in even slightly lesser circumstances. The film is an exercise in extreme formal restraint. Several scenes are captured in single shots, with Chantal Akerman favoring distancing, long and medium shots at a flat angle, observing Jean straight on and from afar. Audio is likewise minimal, consisting entirely of diegetic sounds, and mostly the sound effects of various household chores. There are some perfunctory lines of dialogue and a dedicated time where Jean will listen to the radio, but much of the film takes place in near silence. This rigid style mirrors Jean's own rigid adherence to routine, and is consequently shattering when it begins to break down. A cut to a medium close-up would be unremarkable in almost any other movie, but feels highly significant when Akerman does it here. Bold as the visual filmmaking is, however, I was even more struck by the film's sound design. The pervasive silence, broken mostly by the repetitive sounds of scrubbing or peeling, forced me to really examine my own home life, and why I find it so necessary to fill that time with sound, be it music or podcasts or even just talking. That line of introspection helped me, I think, understand Jean a little better. Indeed, one of the remarkable aspects of the film and Delphine Seyrig's performance is that for all that is withheld, we leave Jean Dillman with such a defined sense of the titular character. Number 4. Solaris. In 2022, I decided to start from scratch with Andrei Tarkovsky, reintroducing myself to the Soviet filmmaker with his debut feature, Ivan's Childhood, which came in at number 6 of last year's version of this list, and revisiting Andrei Rublev, which turned out to be a masterpiece. Surprise, surprise, Teenage Daniel got something wrong. Who could have seen that coming? Anyway, in 2023, I continued this little marathon by watching a whopping 2 more Tarkovsky movies. I'd chastise myself for moving through the man's work so slowly, but given the density of Tarkovsky's films and their very deliberate pacing, Perhaps this is the optimal strategy. And speaking of dense movies with very deliberate pacing, let's talk about Solaris. Scientists on a space station studying the ocean planet of Solaris have been reporting strange visions and hallucinations. Chris Calvin, a psychologist who had previously studied Solaris, is sent to investigate and finds the station and the men who work within it in disarray. Most disturbingly, though, those supposed hallucinations are in fact real. The planet has been reproducing people from the memories of the scientists. Chris gets a first-hand account of this power when he meets Hari aboard the station, his wife who had died 10 years prior. That's an intriguing premise, and the film which follows folds in a science fiction mystery with metaphysical themes of memory and grief. The vast unknown of Solaris becomes a mirror for Chris and the others to project their own memories onto, and have projected back to them. We don't really get to meet Hari, but a refraction of her, filtered through Chris's subjective memory and shrouded still with a decade of grief. The Hari on Solaris Station knows this, yet she still seeks to find meaning in her existence. She may not be the real Hari, she may not even be human, but she is still alive, isn't she? Whether you choose to engage with this material as metaphor for human existence and relationships, or as a literal sci-fi story, Solaris is massively rewarding. The planet Solaris is appropriately alien and mysterious, but also tantalizingly beautiful, while the space station most of the action occurs within is tangibly realized. I also watched Mirror for the first time in 2023, and while also great, Solaris is the kind of moody science fiction I just can't resist. Number 3. Sid and Nancy. One of 2023's biggest disappointments was the cancellation of TCM Underground, a programming block dedicated to showing cult cinema. Beyond highlighting some very cool, very weird films, I really appreciated how the curation expanded the classic and Turner Classic movies. Much respect to Millie DeCherico, who had curated the programming since 2007. The last film TCM Underground screened was Ed Wood's masterpiece Plan 9 from Outer Space, but the last film I watched on their account was Sid and Nancy, and I'm happy to say TCM Underground left me with something amazing. The film does deliver some of the pleasures audiences expect from musician biopics, including an absolutely show-stopping rendition of My Way, which brilliantly references the real music video, but this isn't really a biopic. Or at least, it doesn't follow the generic formulas which have developed. Rather than chronicle Sid Vicious's life or music career, the focus is rather strictly on Sid's destructive romance with Nancy Spungen. To call the movie grim would be an understatement. Even when the characters seem happy, misery seeps out of the frame, evident in Roger Deakins' grimy cinematography and the haunting score. While diegetic performance of Sex Pistols tracks brings a punk rock energy, the non-diegetic music is a lot more somber. It's bleak stuff, but the movie is not just wallowing in suffering. There is a core humanity to the film, due in large part to the outstanding performances from Gary Oldman and Chloe Webb, fearlessly depicting the self-destructive tendencies of the titular lovers without compromise or pity. Alex Cox is a fascinating filmmaker, and for my money, Sid and Nancy is far and away the man's masterpiece. Number 2. The short films of Buster Keaton. Okay, so I'm cheating a bit. This isn't one movie. It's about 20 short films made between 1920 and 1923 that I watched over the course of 3 days. I considered listing these as merely an honorable mention, but that didn't seem right. Cheat or not, the fact is, a lot of the best filmmaking I saw in 2023 was across these shorts, and I'll be damned if I leave them off the list on a technicality. I had half expected to see Keaton develop his artistic sensibilities over the course of these films, but in truth, The man seemed pretty fully formed from the very start with 1 week. Having been apprenticed under the likes of Fatty Arbuckle, Keaton, the director, emerges in these shorts with immensely sophisticated cinematic and comedic instincts. Brilliant as Keaton's stunt work is, it's his masterful compositions which really bring texture to the man's comedies. There's also just a confidence across these films that's hard to deny. I was familiar with the image of Buster sitting at the front of a train, coming directly towards the camera. But man, seeing it in context, it really is one of the coolest images in all of cinema. The GOAT is right. The short films also boil Keaton's art to its essentials, allowing for plots built around premises that probably couldn't sustain a feature, but offer loads of pleasures between 15 to 30 minutes. Keaton also indulges in a style of absurdist visual gags in these short films that he wouldn't really carry over to his features, so if you skip the shorts, you're missing out on a key component of the man's art. Some of the films in this collection feature some dated and rather problematic bits of comedy, but thankfully these issues aren't pervasive. Moreover, while some shorts are better than others, none of these films are bad, and the best ones are transcendent. You should watch them all, but if you only feel like dipping your toes for now, these ones are my favorites. Number 1. A Woman Under the Influence. This movie has haunted me for years, not merely among the most wildly acclaimed classic films I had never seen, but a film at the intersection of my own interests in American cinema in the 1970s. The enormity of the film's reputation became intimidating. How could A Woman Under the Influence possibly live up to all that weight? In 2023, I found out. And what do you know? A Woman Under the Influence is one of the best movies ever made, and unquestionably my favorite John Cassavetes film. Cassavetes had developed a style of raw immediacy in the aesthetics and performances of his films, which reaches a mastery here. The use of a subjective, handheld camera and Cassavetes' prioritizing of character over plot maintain that sense of reality from his earlier works, but there's a greater sense of control in Cassavetes' directorial choices. A feeling that amidst the messiness depicted on screen, the artist's vision is clear and precise. Indeed, the 35mm color cinematography makes for a far more beautiful film than Cassavetes' more amateurish early works, while still remaining faithful to the ethos of those breakthroughs. The film is, in essence, a love story, albeit of a rather fraught marriage, torn at the seams by Nick's abusive outbursts and the stigmatization of Mabel's mental illness. Cassavetes has made a rather cutting portrait of mental illness and how it intersects with gender, but what gives the portrait real weight is how empathetic the characters are. Amidst the chaos and tension, there is also so much affection that makes you really root for these two, even as you recognize the toxicity in the relationship. Crucial here are the performances. Jenna Rollins' work as Mabel has rightfully passed into the Hall of Greatest Film Performances, but Peter Falk more than holds his own. There's a real sense of daring to both. Falk's willingness to linger in Nick's failings and contemptible qualities. Rollins' embrace of Mabel's atypical behavioral tics. To some extent, I feel silly for waiting so long to finally see A Woman Under the Influence, but on the other hand, maybe the movie hit me at exactly the right time. And that's my list. I hope you enjoyed it. If you're looking for the inverse, head on over to Patreon, where you can see me count down the top 10 worst movies I watched in 2023. And boy oh boy, did I watch some doozies. Thank you for watching, and let me know in the comments what the best movies you saw in 2023 were. Happy New Year, everyone!